For Family by Nanook888. Chapter 8. Delivering on a Promise. It had only been 3 days, and yet Leia felt as if she had been away on a lengthy voyage. She looked at the faces of the Alliance High Command assembled around the table, and couldn't help but feel that so much had changed. She had changed. She glanced at Luke, seated on her left, before speaking. The negotiations on Naboo clarified 3 things. Firstly, it is certain that the official negotiations are, as we suspected, a plot to destroy the Alliance. There were grim faces all around, but nobody seemed surprised. Secondly, there is a possibility that our time in Seed was not entirely wasted. We may yet be able to make a deal, although not directly with the Empire. Madine mumbled something under his breath. Leia ignored him and continued. And thirdly, she said, carefully avoiding Luke's gaze, we have reasonable evidence as to the identity of our mysterious benefactor, Vader. Nadine's face was a dark scowl. Mothma and Riken glanced at each other. I propose to begin with the third point, as all 3 are connected, Leia said. Mon waved for her to proceed. While we were in Seed, it was suggested to us who this Vader may be. The individual himself came forward. Darth Vader. There was a pause. Excuse me, Mon said. It was a shocking turn of events. In summary, for reasons he will not reveal to the public, which was the truth from a certain point of view, he claims to have had a change of heart. He insists that he no longer supports the Empire and wishes to see the transition to a more democratic form of government. In preparation for this event, he has been assisting the Alliance under the pseudonym Vader. His plan, he claims, is to destroy Palpatine, temporarily take control to avoid fragmentation and civil war, and transfer power back to the people with the guidance of the Alliance. He has offered a deal, should we decide to accept it. Stunned silence greeted her words. For a long time, the leaders simply stared at each other. And then everyone began speaking at once. They were still there many hours later. Leia, Madine, and Luke had detailed all the discussions which had taken place at the Royal Palace, both during the official negotiations and during their secret meetings with Vader. Once the bare facts had been explained, the conversation had revolved firmly on the possible deal with the Dark Lord. Most of the leaders felt that the deal was too good to pass up so long as one pivotal fact could be established, whether Vader was and would continue to be true to his word. Luke was all too aware of the importance of the Alliance leaders reaching their own decisions without any influence on his part, and he had excused himself a couple of hours ago. This is Vader we're talking about, Madine said for what felt like the 100th time, leaning on his elbow on the table. He was sagging somewhat in his seat, exhausted from hours of debate, but there was still a sharpness in his tone, born of his simmering skepticism. We can't forget that. He's held the galaxy in his evil grip for over 2 decades. Everything we know about him says he'll turn on us the moment he shows up complete victory over Palpatine and then take over the galaxy himself. That would make sense, except he doesn't really need the Alliance on his side if that's his plan, Riken said. It wasn't necessarily his view, but he was exploring the line of argument. He's the one who'll be facing Palpatine, and he's already made it clear that he'll temporarily take over as Emperor. Madine groaned as he suddenly realized what the death of Palpatine would lead to. Emperor Vader. And just when he thought Lord Vader was bad enough, Riken ignored him as he continued with his previous logic. Once he takes over, he'll have ultimate command. Why would he even go to all this trouble of supporting the rebellion and making this deal? To keep us out of his mechanical hair while he deals with Palpatine, Madine suggested, or to have a backup in case everything goes wrong, or to gain our trust so he can wipe out the rebellion more easily later on. There could be any number of reasons, but whatever happens, there's nothing to say he'll actually relinquish control later on. All we have is his word, and we're back to square one. Luke already addressed that, Leia reminded everyone. Luke had insisted that Vader honestly intended to transfer power, and she still remembered his strange expression as he assured them that should the worst happen and Vader ended up changing his mind, he would force the Dark Lord to retire. Yes, and we can believe him, can't we? Madine mumbled. Leia's face became a controlled mask. What do you mean? Medine picked up on her feigned indifference and frowned. I'm sorry, Your Highness, but Skywalker's the one who brought Vader to us, and Skywalker's the one who's vouching for Vader. Now, I know as well as anyone here all that he's done for the Alliance, and I'm grateful. But I'm just not sure if he's thinking straight on this one. I mean, considering what happened on Bespin, it's possible that Vader got under his skin somehow. Leia inhaled a steadying breath to work past her outrage before replying with perfect calm. General, I appreciate your concerns, but I also found no reason to think that Vader was anything but genuine in his assurances. He was not the same man who tortured me on the Death Star, and I am also inclined to give him a chance. Or would you suggest that Vader has also gotten under my skin? Medine started stuttering, but Leia gently cut across him. It's possible that we are so fixated on our past interactions with Vader that we forget the remarkable ability of human beings to grow and develop. There is such a thing as a genuine change of heart, she reminded them with a meaningful glare at Medine. The general briefly held her gaze, but then looked away, knowing he was the very proof of that. A thoughtful silence descended around the table. Her words had exactly the effect she'd hoped. If she, who had suffered so personally at Vader's hands, felt she could make this deal with Vader, then perhaps it was a possibility after all. It was ironic that she was trying to convince them of his sincerity when she herself was still so skeptical. But Leia had never been a selfish person. No matter her own personal issues with the Dark Lord, she would act in the best interests of the galaxy. Someone buzzed the door. Their eyes met in concern. They had all switched off their comm links for this important discussion and left instructions that they were not to be disturbed unless it was urgent. Enter, Leia called into the intercom. A communications controller hurried in, carrying a portable hollow projection pod. He stood awkwardly to attention with a large device in his arms. Chief Mothma, we have been contacted by the Executor. There was precisely 1 second when nobody moved. Then abruptly all the leaders rose to their feet. Set it up here, Leia directed to the space before her on the table. There seemed to be an unspoken understanding that she would continue to communicate with Vader. The others stood well back out of the holoprojector's field. What could you want now? Rakin wondered aloud. Mon didn't miss Leia's carefully empty expression. What do you know, Leia? She asked. Nothing for certain, was the vague response. It was only a short delay before the meter-high hologram appeared and Vader inclined his head in greeting. Your Highness? Lord Vader? Leia responded in kind. I trust your return journey from Naboo went smoothly? The Dark Lord asked. Out of the corner of her eyes, Leia saw the others looking rather surprised at his courteous small talk. She, however, knew who he was really asking after. Thank you, yes. We all returned without incident. What can I do for you? She asked without inquiring in kind. It was a useless exercise pretending to Vader that she cared. She was, however, very much interested in one potential reason for his contacting them. He didn't disappoint her. We have a rescue to plan, Your Highness. I have located Boba Fett. What is thy bidding, my master? Something in Palpatine's eyes flickered as he regarded the hologram of his apprentice's kneeling form, but a moment later his wrinkled face adopted his usual false expression of magnanimity. Rise, my friend, he said, waving his hand. Lord Jango reports that the negotiations indeed proceeded according to plan. You may give the rebels 5 more days to consider the terms of the treaty before summoning them to the final discussions and signing. I want the operation wrapped up and the rebellion crushed. As you wish. Sidious tilted his head. Did you enjoy seeing young Skywalker again, Lord Vader? His voice was silky smooth, dangerously so. He watched as Vader studied him, almost imagining the cogs turning in that helmeted head as to whether his master might be implying anything. He gave no tangible indication of it being anything other than a by-the-by comment, although he knew his apprentice was not stupid enough to believe that. He remains as obstinate as ever, my master, came Vader's careful response. He will need further persuasion to turn. He has grown strong. Only together can we turn him to the dark side of the Force. The message was clear. You will fail without me. Yes, my master. Palpatine's sickly pale hands gripped the metal armrests as he leaned back in his throne. His lighter tone indicated a change of subject.
Are you currently on Geonosis, Lord Vader?
No, my master,
came the puzzled response.
I am in the Cataphane sector pursuing space pirates that have been attacking Imperial convoys.
Palpatine cackled in amusement at the image of the powerful Darth Vader chasing pesky pirates.
The ceasefire with the rebels must be boring you. Fear not, my friend. I have a task for you. I have received reports that you have been sighted on Geonosis.
Vader tilted his head at this strange suggestion.
The garrison there reports that somebody resembling you arrived several hours earlier and have been acting strangely, shall we say. Someone appears to be impersonating you, Lord Vader, an offense punishable by death. Go and investigate and put a stop to this nonsense. Make an example of them.
Yes, my master.
As the Millennium Falcon and another Corellian freighter, a stock YT-2400, dropped out of lightspeed, the red-orange planet with its ring of fragmented rocks materialized some distance before them. What immediately drew their eye, however, was the distinctive sight of the massive Super Star Destroyer orbiting Geonosis, escorted by an Imperial-class Star Destroyer which appeared miniature in comparison. Even with the present ceasefire, there was a tense silence amongst the rebel troops as the two freighters flew towards the Imperial warships. Only Luke seemed to be at ease as he glanced at the executor, then settled back in the co-pilot seat. "Hello, Father."
Son.
Their respective presences reached for each other, mingled. A forced greeting. Lando rose from his seat behind Luke, his uneasy gaze lingering on the Star Destroyers.
"I'll go check the coded frequency,"
he muttered to nobody in particular before heading out of the cockpit.
"Luke,"
Anakin sent through the Force.
"We must tread with care. I suspect that Palpatine knows we plot against him."
Alarm triggered several thoughts in Luke's mind at once. How? When? Where? He brought his runaway thoughts under control. "But you're still here."
"Yes, my modified droid triggered the reports, and he sent me to investigate as we intended. But that is no indication of how much he might know. He hasn't said or done anything as yet, but it would be fatal to underestimate him."
"How could he know? Were we spotted in Theed?"
"I doubt that. It's more likely that he saw it in his meditations. I can't be certain, but there was something about him when we spoke. I feel that not everything is as it seems."
The cockpit door hissed open. "Oh my!" 3PO exclaimed, seeing the executor looming ever larger in the viewport as the Falcon approached Geonosis. He lowered himself tentatively into the vacated seat behind Luke.
"This looks most dangerous, Master Luke. What do you suppose they are doing here?"
The only response was a string of derisive bleeps from R2, who had rolled into the cockpit after him. 3PO clearly didn't appreciate the comments. "Don't call me a mindless philosopher, you overweight blob of grace! It's perfectly clear the danger we're in!" R2 interrupted with a splat and a long trail of whistles. "Secret arrangement? What plans? What are you talking about? This is no time for delusions, R2. That is the Super Star Destroyer!" 3PO turned back to Luke and added in a more respectful tone. "We will be much safer after the peace treaty has been signed, sir." R2 peeled off some beeps sounding suspiciously like laughter, which started 3PO complaining all over again. Luke tuned them out and glanced at Leia, sitting behind Chewbacca, to see if she had noticed the droids snubbling. She hadn't said a single word to anybody since they had left the Alliance fleet, and she still seemed oblivious to everything going on around her. She was currently checking over her blasters yet again, using an old cloth to scrub at whatever imaginary smudge or lint could still be present after all her previous inspections. Her mouth was set in a grim line, the blazing determination in her eyes only fractionally tempered by the worry she fought to keep at bay. Anakin was nudging him in the Force, and Luke returned his attention to his father.
"I'll be down at the garrison soon. Make sure to call me if you encounter difficulties."
"Don't worry, we'll be fine."
"Call me, Luke,"
Anakin repeated, his insistent tone brooking no argument. Luke sighed in mock exasperation, a smile flickering on his face. Having an over-anxious parent was still too novel an experience for him to be tired of it yet. "Yes, father." Chewbacca gave a soft howl in the pilot seat, eyes fixed on the Star Destroyers as they drew in range of their formidable guns. Luke glanced over them. "We're okay, Chewie. They won't fire. They haven't even challenged us." He knew that his father had given the order to allow the rebel ships to pass, but nobody else knew that. Suddenly, his father's exclamation filled his head.
"Why is she here?"
Luke followed his father's focus to the YT-2400 and easily located the person who had drawn his attention. Aside from himself, Leia, Chewie, and Lando, who couldn't have been kept away by anything short of their own deaths, Kara was one of just 3 of the volunteers who had been approved to accompany them. This was a high-risk mission, not only since they would be up against one of the deadliest bounty hunters around, but by virtue of the intel being provided by Darth Vader, and Mothma had been rather tight-fisted in granting clearance for the strike team. "That's Kara. She joined us recently when we rescued some refugees." Then it registered what his father had said. "Wait, you know her?"
Kara?
His father repeated darkly.
That's not Kara, it's Mara. Mara Jade, the Emperor's hand.
Luke couldn't explain why he felt as he did in that moment. It was as if someone had punched him in the gut and the air had frozen in his lungs. Mara was the Emperor's hand. Anakin sensed the rolling emotions in Luke and was disturbed to discover that his son had feelings for Mara Jade. He wanted to advise him against it, lecture him, but something held him back. Perhaps he questioned if he had any right to say anything or simply didn't know where to start. Either way, after a brief moment of indecision, he focused on the practicalities instead.
I could take her out of your strike force, Anakin offered. There are numerous pretexts why I might bring your ships on board the Executor and separate you all.
A frown creased Luke's brow as he closed his eyes, and he didn't answer straight away. "Can you tell me about her?" he asked eventually. Anakin sent forth a stream of information over their mental link. Details of how Palpatine had found her and brought her under his tutelage, what his father knew of her training as she grew up, and of her missions, her abilities, strengths, and weaknesses, something of how she thought. Luke immersed himself in the Force to seek guidance as he absorbed the information. Anakin waited quietly after he had finished, forcing himself to be patient until the Falcon was seconds away from entering the planet's atmosphere.
There's still time for me to bring you in,
he prompted gently. Luke finally came to a decision and mentally shook his head. She's playing her role as part of the rebellion for the time being. Her aim wouldn't be to kill us, or she would have tried already. She'll help us against Boba Fett and whatever he has in store for us down there.
She could turn against you any moment, sabotage the mission.
I know, but she deserves a chance. Luke sighed. I don't know why, but the Force... He trailed off, not knowing how to describe it. Anakin could feel it too. The Force was settled, swirling harmoniously around their whole group, not alarmed in the least by her presence. It must have been why Luke couldn't detect her during his earlier search for the Emperor's hand. Anakin relented, albeit with great reluctance.
Promise me you'll be careful.
Of course.
Well, we have the precise coordinates, Lando announced unhappily as he returned to the cockpit and handed it out to Chewie. Are you sure about this, Luke?
Luke stirred from his reverie at the sound of his name and focused on his surroundings. After a lag, his brain registered what his ears had heard. Vader hired some bounty hunters to intercept Boba Fett en route to Jabba the Hutt, and they chased him here. Han's down there, all right.
That might be, but what if it's a trap?
Of course it's a trap. Fett's been holed up there for at least a day. He'd have the whole place primed with sensors and booby traps by now.
You know that's not what I meant, Lando muttered as Chewie continued to navigate them down to the planet's surface. Is his high and mighty up there still? He jerked his thumb upwards, vaguely back in the direction of the Executor. Luke nodded. Oh, yes, his father was still up in the Executor, all right, bristling anxiously at the thought of Luke entering the fray without him, and now with Mara Jade in their midst. Good. This is dangerous enough as it is without adding him to the equation. Luke didn't mention that his high and mighty was planning to follow them down, or about the added complication of the Emperor's hand. The desolate, arid landscape stretched before them. Only on closer inspection could one distinguish the artificial nature of the spires rising like giant termite nests from the same orange-brown rocks and sand covering the entire surface of Geonosis. Chewbacca owled, pointing a hairy paw towards a rocky spire looming up on the starboard side. It looked no different to any of the others they had already passed over. The droid foundry? Luke asked. Chewie growled in confirmation. Abruptly, Leia stood and jammed her blasters into the holsters hanging from her hips. She marched wordlessly out of the cockpit. Before Luke's own impatience could rise, he took a moment and fluently channeled his mind into battle-ready calm.
In the space of a heartbeat, he had crystalline clarity of thought and absolute focus. Anakin sensed the shift in Luke immediately.
May the Force be with you, son.
And with you, Father. Even Lando noticed. He watched as Luke rose from the co-pilot seat, every movement stealthy and fluid as the budding Jedi stepped out after Leia, his focused gaze as searing as the lightsaber hanging from his belt. Lando shook his head as he followed.
Boba Fett's not gonna know what hit him.